Yes, it was just the preseason, but the Phoenix Suns continue to own the Los Angeles Lakers. Another win, 119 to 115. Real preseason basketball, none of that crazy shooting National Basketball League stuff. Aaron Edwards is here. We'll break today's game down on today's episode of Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 5 seasons, and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you all for making Locked On Suns your first listen. Tuning in after preseason game number 2, a win. We are not in for a winless preseason like we saw in 2020, although that did result in a finals appearance, so maybe we all would have taken that anyway. But this game was interesting for a variety of reasons. We're going to break down Payne and Cam Johnson leaving the game with injury. We'll break down Dario Saric debuting for the first time since Game 1 of the NBA Finals in 2021. A lot to get to. So, again, a big thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen. Hit subscribe, hit follow. Make sure you do not miss the show. We'll have one more this week. We're back next week, Monday through Friday, previewing the season, recapping the preseason games, all of it. Today, though, Aaron Edwards is here. Aaron Edwards, I promise I can say that name. Joining us for his weekly visit. Aaron, I'll give you the first choice here. What we saw Payne and Cam Johnson both go out with finger sprains. I believe it was a thumb for Cam Johnson, and it was I don't know which finger. It just was called finger, I believe, for Payne. And we saw basically everybody on this roster. So what jumped out to you from this win?
First of all, I'm not really worried about the finger sprain thing. I think it was just basketball players know once you jam your finger, you're probably going to be dealing with it for a little bit. So it was just one of those precautions that you don't want to deal with a jammed finger for the rest of the preseason if you don't have to. So I honestly just think I jammed my finger like 2 weeks ago and I'm still dealing with it, and it's annoying, but I can still play. But I just think that they're just like, you're going to keep jamming it until the season ends probably. So might as well just not play the rest of this game today. So that was probably like the one thing.
Yeah, people pointed out too, not as bad as like Mikal Bridges had a dislocated finger. That's obviously a lot worse because that can start to mean, you're going to break something. You're going to have damage to the rest of your hand. You can't, he had to get that plate basically to keep it in place, and he still played because he's insane, but like that's much worse. Chris Paul last year tore a ligament, so like this is not that. So to your point, like I think you texted me if this was like, even the regular season, they might have come back, but especially like this is not an injury that would have kept him out from the playoffs. But I think in a good way, Monty's pretty stubborn in his ways with some of the rotation stuff. So those two guys going out meant it became a free-for-all in the rotation.
Yeah, and giving Monty a free-for-all in a rotation, like you kind of have to force him to do that. So he probably played Shamet a lot more minutes than he thought he was going to play him today, which Shamet loved apparently because you could tell. And yeah, like maybe too many Torrey Craig minutes, but other than that, like you just kind of forced him to test lineups. And it just looked like Monty was just trying stuff out today. And yeah, it worked out because we were pretty much just in a sloppy game toward the end, but I like that he just tested stuff out.
Yeah, it was 25 or so minutes for most of the starters tonight. It was 22 in game 1. So my guess is we'll probably see next Monday is the next time they play. I would think we'll probably see the starters maybe hit about 30 minutes in that one. And then I would think that they might honestly sit the last preseason game. He hasn't said anything like that. That's just me guessing, but there are a lot of guys, like they have to make decisions on who, if anybody's going to get the 15th roster spot or if they're going to leave it open. There was a little bit of a question going into preseason, going into training camp, like they could have cut Jock Landale because he's on a non-guaranteed contract. Seems like that ship has sailed. And then two, it's like, let's talk about Jock and Landry for sure. But I think the other part of this too that's lingering that was helpful to not only like fans and whatever who are watching, but to the team, which is always the puzzling thing with me for Monty sometimes is like, it would help you to know a little bit more about these guys. I know they see them in practice, but we have this Jay Crowder trade that's pending. And, somebody might have to step up who isn't expecting to be in the rotation, or, maybe somebody doesn't play super well and you feel a little more all right trading them. Like, I don't know. That's all of what's hanging over this. But as you said, a couple guys stood out. I've talked a lot about Jock because he played well or decently well in that first preseason game, and he's been the talk of like camp and everything. But what do you think? He's not people were in my comments on YouTube when I was saying like he's a lot different than I was expecting, saying like, oh, this is always how he's been. I just didn't know he was going to be as mobile and as energetic as he is. He hustles, which it's hard to do when you're 7 feet tall, but somehow he gets his hand on tons of offensive rebounds and he kind of feels like he's everywhere in there.
Yeah, it was the rebounding. And I was at the open practice and I just saw him warming up and I just didn't know his jumper was just that smooth. Like he looks comfortable shooting it. It's a smooth stroke. And I knew nothing about the dude going in. So just seeing him warm up and shoot during that open practice, I was like, oh, like this dude will confidently pull up. And we saw that today. Like when he really had like the green light, he would pull up and he seemed really confident doing it.
We wanted to talk about Dario a little bit because he did debut in this game, played a little bit of 4, played a little bit of 5. So I think we can talk a little bit more about Jock when we talk about Dario, because that's really the back and forth right now. But Shamet, to me, it's probably like you said his name early enough. I feel bad that I didn't say his name sooner. Like if there's any story of this preseason game, it is Landry Shamet. Like he looked like the guy we saw in game 5 of the Mavericks series. He looked like the guy we saw at times when Booker and Paul had missed time last year, the guy who took that game-winning potential out-of-bounds shot against Milwaukee last year, on and on. We've seen this before, but not always to this extent. I mean, 21 points, 5 of 7 from 3. He was bombing. He was taking shots confidently, putting the ball on the ground to get to his spots, taking step-back, pull-up threes. What did you see from Shamet? Anything different today, or is it just like, dude, play this way every single night?
Pretty much the latter, like just play like that. It seemed like last year he wasn't confident, and the second the ball touched his hands, he would just kind of give it back to whoever was like to Payne or Book or Chris Paul, whoever was on the floor, and he was kind of just acting like the second fiddle. And we need a spark off the bench, so we don't need our spark off the bench to act like a second fiddle. Like we need somebody to take control, and he seemed like he wasn't ready to do that yet. And today, the second the ball touched his hands, it seemed like you weren't getting it back, and I kind of like that from him.
I really liked, well, I mean, tonight it was not very many minutes, but I like the idea of, we saw some time with Payne not playing in this game really, where Shamet was kind of like the point guard. I mean, he was out there with other guys who could handle the ball. We saw that, I want to say, a little bit last year, not a whole ton. I don't think it's the type of thing where you put those lineups out there and you let Shamet like run a bunch of pick and roll. But if he's out there with Booker, maybe Bridges, some other guys who can handle, and it starts to just be a little bit more free flowing and no one's really the point guard, but also everybody can kind of handle it and pass it. That's interesting to me. And I think that's an area where you could really see him excel, because if you remember like the other best stretches of his career, a lot of the times those were the types of groups he was out there with, whether it was those Clippers teams with like Beverly as the point guard when he was drafted, or, Ben Simmons, or these even like James Harden. He had some good run when Harden was like making that MVP push a couple of years ago with Brooklyn, and it was just him and a bunch of shooters out there, and Shamet was able to play decently well then. Like, that feels like it could work. And with Payne not playing well, and I don't think the injury is going to be too big of a thing, but that could be a way to mix and match the bench and the starters a little bit, where you can take advantage of what Shamet can do.
Yeah, like I feel like, well, even bench wise, we still, if we want to use, depending on how we want to use Shamet, Like, if we want to put him in the corner or let him handle the ball, like, we still need somebody that can get to the lane whenever they want coming off the bench, because even that's not Chris Paul's game. So I just think that we still have to figure out how to even utilize him, because we're still kind of using him as a point guard that can get his own shot off. And every once in a while, he'll get an open corner three. So we're not really getting into the lane enough to even let him play the game that he's used to playing.
He's running a lot of that stuff, the sort of quick hitting Booker plays, right? Like coming quick off of a pin down screen at the top of the key, or taking a dribble handoff, or running like kind of like a second side pick and roll, but not with the intention of actually getting downhill or, passing it to the big man. It's just to get him open to take a shot. So, yeah, I mean, I was trying to end the segment on a high note of this optimism of what he could do, but I think you're right. Like, he is going to function best next to other guys. So it's like, is that Booker with other starters? Is that going to be Payne? Is that going to be letting him dribble more? I think that's still open to interpretation, but just him getting shots to go in and playing aggressively is at least going to give Monty something to build off of. Another thing to build off of is going to be this center rotation. And Jock Landale seems to have the anchor very firmly thrown down at that spot right now, very surprisingly. So I want to get Aaron's takes on some of that a little bit more and talk about the debut of Dario. Why did he not play Monday? Why did he play today? How did he look? All of that. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for football betting info all year long. Find the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every single game that you can bet on. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for sports wagering info with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there, not just pro and college football here in the U.S. But on the theme of football, I'm antsy. I'm chomping at the bit, whatever you want to say, for the World Cup. And the odds are already up across BetOnline. They have tons of stuff. Game 1 for November is already up here in terms of who's going to win, betting on the lines, etc. You can also bet on teams where they're going to get eliminated, who's going to make it. The U.S. is minus 115 to make it out of their group. That's nice odds. It makes me feel good as wanting them to win, but that's also something you can make a little bit of money on. If you hate England and you want them to lose, which I will completely support you on, you can bet on them to get eliminated in the group stage. That's plus 800. They've lost a bunch of games recently. They got relegated from their European group that they've been competing with, so they're not looking good. Bet on them to lose. That's fun too. Bet on the U.S. to win. That's the best part, of course. And pro and college football every single weekend. Head to betonline.net, guys, or use their mobile app to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, Dario Saric played 8 minutes tonight, Aaron, and 12 points, 4 rebounds. What did you think? He played played power forward most of his time out there, got matched up on LeBron James a little bit. Why did he not play Monday? I expected if we were going to see him in the preseason, it would be very obvious that he's creaky and rusty, and that was why he didn't play Monday. But he looked fine. I don't get it. I don't understand. I don't have an explanation.
I think you're slowly trying to not say what you want to say, but I think we're thinking about trading him. I think that's the only thing that makes sense is that Monty wants to show as little as possible, show that he can move, show that he can do Sarge stuff, but not show any much more than that. And I think that's kind of what the deal is. Get hurt. Yeah. So I think that just might be the bit hey guys, he can play, he can shoot, he got to the line today. You want a piece of this? I really think that was kind of just the plan, because there's really no other reason especially he's going to play big minutes for this team coming off the bench. There's no reason Sarge should only play 8 minutes in the preseason, coming off an injury where he didn't play the entire season. He's either playing into getting in shape or you're playing to trade him. It's kind of the only deal that you have with it.
Is Animal House the movie where they carry around the dead guy?
Weekend at Bernie's?
Yes, Weekend at Bernie's. Thank you. Correct. I was also thinking of the episode of Atlanta, the Teddy Perkins episode. That's Dario Saric right now. he's here, guys. Like, don't worry about it. Don't ask any questions. Like, this is him. He can play basketball. Like, he's good. His ACL is healed, and he looked great for Croatia, and he can score 12 points. That's the best explanation that I have. That's the only thing that I can think of what this is. I mean, let's transition to Jock a little bit to talk about these guys together, because as much as I don't understand the Dario thing, I don't have a real reason to believe he can't be close to what he had been. I mean, again, you look at him, he's fine. He's moving well. It's not like you look and you're like, wow, he's going to have to play center the rest of his career because he just can't move anymore. It's not like that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I get the idea of if you can trade in your $9 to $10 million backup center who does these, 3 or 4 things really well, and you can bring in Jock who does a lot of those same things and only makes $2 million. I understand it. And I don't think it's crazy to say Jock checks a lot of the boxes. I don't think he's as good as Dario, but he's not far from it.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't say it's like a money thing, but I had no idea Jock's game, and seeing him today, it's really fluid with what Monty wants to do. He seems comfortable switching sometimes. He's really good on the offensive boards. And like I said, like his shooting stroke is smooth, and he's really just bouncy, and you can just tell like he can just get around and move a lot better than I thought he could. And Monty probably sees that. He's like, do I need 2 of these to come on the bench? Probably not. And one's way more expensive than the other. So it's kind of just more shocking that Jock kind of just pulled this off. And it's kind of, especially when we need trade bait and we need when we're probably going to talk about this in a couple of weeks or whatever, like teams are tanking and we have our own picks and we have players whose contracts that people probably want right now. It's just kind of just really good timing that Jock is playing the way he is, and Saric is kind of just going to get as many minutes as Monty wants to show people.
Yeah, you said you can't have 2. They did for most of the time Monty's been here, whether it was Baines. Well, at one point they had Baines, Saric, and Frank. Then they've had just Frank and Dario. I mean, neither one of those guys has been able to stay healthy. But like as far as having them on the roster, that has kind of been the MO. But either way, it feels like Jock has overtaken Dario. And like I sort of get that. I mean, I've talked about it a little bit. I think he's legit 7 feet, like even just that difference makes a difference. Yeah. But he also can use it better than Frank could. I think he seems to be a pretty consistent shooter. If you look at his numbers, not just in Australia last or 2 years ago, but also in some of the European teams, he's basically taken like 200 threes overseas. I know the FIBA line is closer, but whatever. And he's made like, mid to high 30s on those. So like, I think he's a pretty decent shooter. He can rebound, like you said. I think he's going to be decent enough moving the ball. A lot of those Australian guys at the big man positions are just used to doing that. Maybe he's not as gifted of a passer as Dario, but he can do it. So I get that. And like, yeah, the money thing, it's not a this year thing to me necessarily, but it's just like if you were thinking about re-signing Dario or going out and getting somebody, well, if you can re-sign Jock at a decent price, I think that checks that box for you. And Monty's probably just realizing like he can't play 2 of those guys. Like as much as he might love it, like you cannot win in the NBA playing 2 guys like that at one time. So you might as well not have multiple on the roster.
Yeah, I think just bench-wise, like he probably doesn't know where the points are going to come from anyway. So you kind of just can't have those 2 playing in general. I mean, like they're going to spread the ball around, and the passing is going to be like pretty good, but he still needs to find somewhere to get the bench points from. So it's not really a passing and ball movement kind of thing. So I really think that he's going to have to make a choice between the 2 because he's got to find the points for that unit. And you can't just put those 2 dudes on the floor.
Well, and to your point, to wrap this part up, I think maybe the part you're not wanting to say there is like, again, Dario not playing also makes him part of the solution for the bench, which means by being able to be part of the trade, right? Like I think,
Yeah.
and it might not even be the same trade because if you're talking about Dario and Jay Crowder together, that starts to be a lot
Yeah.
of money. I'm not sure
Yeah.
there's guys available who cost that much at this point in the season or this much close to the season, but it could be two different things. It could just be, hey, later in the year we'll start to poke around. I don't think Torrey Craig has looked awesome. We'll talk in a minute about the negatives, I think, to close things out here, what we didn't necessarily love, what kind of concerns we have. But to your point, like Jock opening up himself as an option there not only is cheaper, not only gives you a little bit of a younger player, somebody who might have a little more potential to get better and do some different things for you, move around a little more than you're used to, but it also frees up Dario, who's on an expiring contract, to be traded. So I think that makes the most sense. That's my going theory. But I also know that Monty and James Jones do some weird stuff. And like if Dario just was getting DNPs into December, I also wouldn't be surprised. I don't have a great answer for it. But let's switch gears a little bit. There's a lot of guys we haven't gotten to, some who didn't look so good. So we'll get to that in just a second. First, super excited to tell you guys about this sponsor, My Solar Nerd. If you live in a sunny state like ours, you've heard people literally coming to your door, if not bothering you on the street, claiming they have free solar. But the truth is, many of these companies, they're not even local. They don't know what it really takes to install, manage, and get the benefits of solar in Arizona, but they're using misleading tactics. They're overcharging you, all of that stuff. My Solar Nerd helps you get the best solar system to fit your needs. The guys at mysolarnerd.com are local. They understand the nuances of going solar here in the Valley. They've been doing this for a while, and they understand that an educated customer is a happy customer, and their no-pressure approach will make sure all of your questions get answered. And once you're ready to get started, they'll put their industry knowledge to work for you by choosing the best equipment, warranties, and accredited installers in their network. They'll also help you figure out all the credits and incentives you may qualify for to make sure you're not only getting the best product, getting your house powered the way you needed to, but also reaping the benefits, getting that money back in your pocket like we know solar can do. And our listeners will get a $50 Amazon gift card when they book a no-commitment evaluation. Again, this promotion only for Locked On listeners and only for homeowners. Of course, you can't put solar panels on your apartment building no matter how much you might want to. Visit mysolarnerd.com, select Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. Make the switch to solar on your terms. Start your research process now by visiting mysolarnerd.com today and show Locked On some love by letting them know we sent you. Folks, going solar doesn't need to be complicated, and mysolarnerd.com makes it easy. All right, I think we got to start with Torrey Craig here on the negatives. Aaron, I feel bad in a way if you just somebody just looking at the box score, they woke up, rolled out of bed, they missed the game, they're looking at the box score, then they flip on us talking, and then they get to 20 minutes in and we just attack a guy who had 6.7 rebounds. It's not so much the box score. It's not even so much just today. I'm just struggling after a couple of preseason games now, and knowing the role that they need to be filled with Crowder out, I'm just having trouble getting excited about what Torrey Craig is. I just think we know what he brings to the table, and it's just not enough for what this team needs. I don't know what the benefit of having him out there is right now.
Yeah, he's not like an especially great passer. He rebounds well, and we kind of just want him for the defense and just slashing and sometimes shooting, and he's not doing that well. Like, his defense is fine, but that's not what we got him here for. I think that, yeah, like you said, like we know what he is and we know what's missing right now, and he's not the player that can fill that spot.
He's one of those players I feel like where I had this thought last year when we were getting ready for the playoffs, since he didn't play super well in the regular season, was in and out of the rotation. He's almost more of a playoff player than he is a regular season player, because you said the defense, but it's like a regular season bench defensive forward. Like that,
Yeah.
That's not really important because who's he going to guard, right? Like, but in the playoffs, when you're able to put him out there for a few minutes at a time and he guards Giannis or he guards Tatum or he guards somebody in the West, whoever that might be, that's the value that he provides. So it's almost like he's less valuable in the regular season than now, especially when you don't have Crowder, you don't have Cam Johnson with the bench unit anymore. So you're trying to fill that void and you didn't really upgrade much. It starts to be even more like, okay, he's good at a certain set of things, but a regular season bench player who's playing 15 to 20 minutes a night, like he needs to be able to do something on offense. He's just not doing it right now. But also you switch to some of the other guys. I don't necessarily feel like Ish Wainwright is coming in and lighting it up either. So I don't know if there's a great answer right there in terms of trying to patch things up while they don't have Crowder.
Yeah, I think Torrey Craig, he's good with lineups that are decent at scoring, and if you need help on switches and stuff, and you need to like guard probably like the best offensive player on the floor, then yeah, like Torrey Craig's going to be good for that because there's going to be other scoring on the floor with him. He's out there with people that can't score, so I think the offense just looks bad in general with him out there because you're asking him to do something that he really can't do, and you're really not like he doesn't need that much help on the defensive end, and you don't really have great defensive players out there with him. So he just looks bad out there because there's nobody to help him do what he's good at. Because, yeah, you don't want Torrey Craig to be your second best scorer on the floor. Like, you just don't. You can't have that.
Oh, that's bleak. Yes, I agree with you. I do think in the meantime, if he does play some minutes, if they don't get a Crowder trade done by opening night, he provides rebounding. I'm sure there's people, banging their heads feeling like we're not addressing the obvious thing he does. But
he's a great offensive rebounder. Like, yes.
Yeah. But again, like, is that what you need to keep your team afloat when the bench is out there during, regular season game number 57, when you just need to keep pace in the standings? He's not going to kill you, but he's not going to do things to alleviate other players. He just does things that are complementary to, like you said, he's best when he's around great players. There's a reason that he's looked best when he was playing with Jokic or he was playing with, a lot of minutes with the Suns starters in the first playoff run. So that's him. I think he'll get a role as long as the Crowder thing is unresolved. I think he'll be ahead of Ish Wainwright in the rotation. Unfortunately, Ish hasn't done a lot in these preseason games to up himself either. Staying on the negatives, I bashed one guy who had a perfectly good box score night. I feel like there is a Golden State Warriors edition that also had a nice box score night who came over from Golden State, Aaron, that you have some thoughts on. So I'll give you the floor here.
I know we're talking about Damian Lee, but I don't know. Like, I don't know what was the plan for him. Like, he's decent on switches, and yeah, like he seems confident, but he's not shooting well. But this is still preseason. Let me preface that. But he wasn't shooting well last year either. I just don't know what he was here to fix. Like, I don't know what spot he was here to fix for the most part. And he didn't have that.
They probably didn't think he was going to play until Crowder decided he wasn't going to come to Phoenix again, right? I mean,
yeah, that means they probably knew about the Crowder thing a long time ago. But even when we got him, I was just like, okay, like he's going to be our 14th player. But it seems like they're going to give him real playing time, and when the Warriors didn't even want to do that.
Yeah, the main seasons when he played a lot for the Warriors the past few years were the years they were bad and everybody was hurt. Like, I don't mean that. That sounded really bad, but that's the truth. He wasn't a major factor when they were at their best. I do think he's he's not just Steph's brother-in-law. Like, he's a good NBA player. He has skills. He's big. He's genuinely 6'5". That's something that I wasn't expecting. Like, he has that size. You mentioned the potential to be a little bit more versatile defensively because of that. I think playing in Golden State, he's used to handling a lot of different assignments on defense.
And he's going to be really smart on defense. Like, the Warriors are one of the smartest defensive teams I've seen ever. So, he knows how to play defense. He's going to fit in that system, really easily. But it's another one of those things. When he has good players on the floor with him, I think he's going to play well. But we just don't have, anybody in that unit yet that's gonna help him flourish at the stuff that he's good at. And we're gonna talk about the bench so much more, but I'm just saying, the dudes that we're asking to do way too much stuff, they would flourish if they just had anybody out there that could just kind of bring it out of them. And Chris Paul can't play all those minutes. Book can't play all those minutes. And Cam Payne is Cam Payne. Like, I don't know what guard's going to make them play the way that they're probably used to playing.
I don't know either. I hope we get some clarity on that soon. I do think like this is a little bit of an interesting way to frame it, and hearing your thoughts on it in terms of like there's a lot of kind of secondary and third type of guys on this bench who could make up like a unit that works together, but that metaphor that always gets thrown around with basketball and stuff of like the straw that stirs the drink. They don't have that right now. So everybody suffers as a result of that. Maybe it's a little bit of that Shamet stuff. Maybe we did see more of a real rotation tonight. So maybe it's some of those lineups like we saw where Paul is playing more with the bench. He did that a lot last year. Maybe he does it even more again this year. I talked about that a little bit on Wednesday's show. There's not an easy answer. There are some things that could make it a little bit better in the meantime. I do think Lee, like, he's one of those guys, if people are able to watch him in warm-ups or anything, not like a shooter where you just see it right away. Like a lot of hand. The best shooters to me, it's hips and it's like body torque. Like if you watch really good shooters, their whole body's involved in it. Lee, it's his hands. Like he's shooting with just his right and his left hand, and that's all that's moving. So it's really weird shot to watch. It's never been an elite thing. It's like 35 to 37%. So I think he will play. I mean, I think the bench right now is Payne, Shamet, Lee, Craig, Landale. I think until anything changes, that's what the main bench lineup will be. So
the bench wasn't even my biggest beef today, by the way.
All right, what was it?
We've talked about this before, but it was like, what is Ayton now that he got his money? And it's not Ayton that I'm beefing with. It's Monty. Like he got his money now. Like you have to decide that, like, what you want to use him as. Like, how do you want to play him? And like the other thing was, I like when early in the game today, he had other players initiating the offense, and Chris Paul was playing off ball, and he got like a corner three earlier today. And then, like, I know it's probably the Cam Johnson injury, but he kind of bailed on it super early, and we just went back to the old stuff. And I just worry, like, how fine is Monty with the growing pains that are going to come with letting other players initiate the offense so they can learn. And it's going to be ugly at first. And I don't know how fine he is with it being ugly at first. And that was probably my biggest beef today was Monty. Like, I'm down to lose to the Lakers in Vegas in a preseason game if we know who can handle the ball, who can pass, if Cam Johnson can handle the ball and pass, if Mikal Bridges can start an offense and start the motion and pass. Like, we got to know. We got to know, and it's going to be ugly at first. And I wonder if Monty is fine with how ugly it has to be at first.
I wonder the same thing about Chris Paul, right? Like he can give, we talked about this last week, like he can give up control very easily when it's really working. You know, is he going to want to go stand in the corner while Ayton coughs up turnovers or makes some questionable decisions or just misses shots? Or we saw him getting double teamed. Beverly was being really smart about double teaming on a couple of possessions. And Ayton, you know, I don't think it was ugly, but he didn't score on those spots. He didn't create shots for teammates in those spots. So, yeah, I think you're right. The Bridges and Ayton today were 4 of 20. I will make this a YouTube clip because this is what I get for talking too much. We talked about bench guys that nobody cares about for 30 minutes, and then we're like, oh, yeah, the guys who matter. Let's get a little bit of time on them. So this will be a YouTube clip. If you're already watching the clip, you already know that. My beef, so to your point on, you know, being patient with it, especially on a night where the Suns and Lakers only played this game as a halftime show for Scoot and Wembanyama. This game, nobody even paid attention to. So it's like, if you can't even kind of commit to it when you're the halftime show for 19-year-olds, you got to really like second guess yourself. Like you got to double down and reassert your commitment to like these growing pains that are going to happen. But on that note, I wanted to talk about Dwayne Washington a little bit here to close things out.
I know you did.
we won't today because this is my other beef. I think that the scorekeeper in that arena, who I actually don't even think it's the same arena, but I'm sure it's the same scorekeeper. I doubt there's many of them in Vegas. Is so drunk off of the show that those two kids put on last night that he completely did not see in front of his face at the table when these players checked in. And the box score for this game says that Dwayne Washington did not play basketball tonight. He played like 10 minutes. So I think that it was just the power, the raw power of Scoot and Victor just putting on a show that these basketball guys in Vegas, they're not used to it. They don't have an NBA team, and he lost track of everything going on. He just didn't do his job right today. I think he should be fired. If he can't handle that show and it results in this type of performance, I think it's time to move on from him. That's my beef for today.
I think that everybody's just like, maybe he knows his team. Maybe he's a Pacers fan. Like, everybody's in tank mode and they don't care about anything else. Maybe he wanted Dwayne Washington because he missed a lot of early shots, and he's like, the Pacers can do this. Like, let's bring him back and let's have him go over, and let's lose all the games this season, and let's just run it.
Yeah, I think anybody should be thinking about that. I wouldn't even be honestly, like, if the Suns tanked, I would kind of get it. I wouldn't like enjoy the process of watching the games because I liked the playoff runs the past 2 years.
Lottery night would be so fun though.
I mean, post Chris Paul plan, I think you could do a lot worse than Scoot. I will humble brag that I got to spend time with Scoot because the institute I work at did some stuff with the Ignite team. So like I got to talk to Scoot. The dude is amazing at like 17 years old, the way that he was handling himself in that situation. And just, you can tell with some people, and I could tell with him. So yeah, I mean, I would take a tanking season, but that's a conversation for not this podcast because the Suns are not going to tank, and not this day because the draft is a year from now. But that'll do it for today's show, guys. Hope you enjoyed preseason game number 2. Do not believe the box score. There was some Dwayne Washington minutes, but you can believe some of the other uglier parts of the box score. That'll do it. Thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen. Subscribe, follow wherever you're finding the show. And in the meantime, make Locked On NBA your second listen here today to catch up on everything else going on around the league.